Well, good evening. Welcome back. As I've told you many times, I'm a big fan of fall. I'm not really a big fan of fall back, except for the extra hour of sleep I got. That was, well, not really. My body is still programmed. Some of you are nodding. My dog comes and gets me at 7 a.m. every morning, and she doesn't know we've fallen back. So she came up, and I said, not yet. And so 30 minutes of laying there at 6:30, I said, I might as well just get up. So I'm not readjusted yet. I'm going to pass along this kind of funny thing I saw on social media, Facebook today. It says, let's roll back the time so it gets dark at 4 o'clock, said by no one ever. So that's kind of how I felt about it. It's like, who came up with this idea? I may be like Arizona. Let's not do it. We won't spring forward. And I got an amen from David, a silent one in the back. He said, okay. I want to also read you. This is very touching, and I know that we've been praying, and this kind of includes all of us. But Hyman Copeland has been keeping up with, to date, with this young child that is really his daughter's. They're kind of such friends. They vacation together. They're all in the pictures together for those families that have jointly been in the congregation. But I want to read you this update that came from today about Ellie. This is from Ellie's mama. Thank you for all the many supplications that went up for Ellie this morning as you worship God throughout the U.S. and even abroad. We are so blessed by your prayer and concern. I do believe that God works today and can heal my sweet Ellie. But if he chooses not to, I will not be dismayed. For he tells us in Isaiah 55:9, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. We do not know what lies ahead, but we have already seen so many blessings through this tragedy. We've seen people on their knees before God that have left him years ago. We've had brothers and sisters we've never met come to pray with us and take care of our needs. We've seen nurses and doctors who are in awe that this little one could have such a huge support group. We even had a doctor say he had never had much to do with religion before, but we have made him rethink that, and that if he had been born into a different family, he wishes it would have been ours. You see, the Lord is working. He's doing great things, so never forget his ways are higher than ours. Little Miss Ellie continues to need more and more medical attention. The Lord is working. He is doing great things, so never forget his ways are higher than ours. Just basically that you're keeping her heart rate above 60 and her blood pressure below the 160s. The doctors believe that her swelling may be getting worse. Please keep her in your prayers. But I wanted to tell you that because, God works in all of these ways. And just as he mentioned about an outpouring of support, which other people will pay attention to, and gravitate to. And so I wanted you to be able to know that as well. Also, a quick little apology for some of the ladies that are going to get to hear this lesson almost a second time. I told them I was working on this lesson for ladies' Bible class, and we kind of had a malfunction as the internet, sometimes happens with a computer. And my problem of my computer has been kind of ongoing, and so it kind of quit 3 minutes into the ladies' Bible class. And I thought it would be unfair to have them come over to ladies' Bible class to get 3 minutes of something and then go home. So I kind of said, well, here's my notes, and I'm just going to say and spray it at you and kind of throw it and see what sticks. So they're going to be some overlapping. And so if some of you ladies that were there say, I think I've heard this one before, then that's good because it was still fresh and you heard that Wednesday. But my apologies to that. As we know that what is common to man, the common fall as we have been illustrated in 1 John 2:16, it's kind of everything the world has to offer. It's the lust of the flesh. It's what I want to do. The lust of the eyes, the I've got to have it now, and the pride of life. Who am I? Don't you know who I am? What I have accomplished. We see this play out each and every day of our lives as we live in today's world. Even those who unfortunately come across being perhaps above the law. We always want everybody to go to a standard, and it kind of irritates us on both ends, those who have no respect for the law, and then those who are in law enforcement or a judge or a police officer that actually takes the law into going above what they should, and that kind of puts us out as well. So there's this tension between the two groups these days. Those that are put in all kinds of authoritative positions, not only from law enforcement to politicians, who think they can just kind of get away with anything and everything. It kind of sickens the whole process, and there's no wonder why that only 40% of this country will vote in an election. I mean, 60% of the people in a presidential election will stay home. They don't want any part of it. They don't want anything to do with the political system as we know it today. But we've seen the abuse from politicians to even officers who are there to uphold the law. They should uphold the law. Who are not the law, but may seem to them as such. Many are disrupted when those go far and seem to be above the law, or even become in their minds really the law. There was a movie, if you have not seen it, I'll just briefly explain it, where a character was played by Sylvester Stallone. The movie is called Judge Dredd. It was where he was judge, jury, and executioner. It was hypothetically in the future. And basically, you didn't have a court system. And they had a system where these were judges on the streets with guns. No one else had guns, and they would come and approach you, and basically, you were deemed either guilty or not guilty on the spot. Maybe back in the old Judge Roy Bean days, remember the hanging judge? It was judge, jury, and executioner all in one afternoon. There is a line in that movie, though, where Sylvester Stallone says, "I am the law." That's very interesting, and I know that basically that comes across that some people say, well, I'm not upholding the law, or I'm not even a lawmaker of making the law. I am it. I am the law. In Jesus' time, we know that there were those who saw themselves as the law. They were supposed to be upholding the law. They were supposed to be law keepers. They were keeping of the law, but they were not the law, but they found themselves in that case. We know them as scribes. We know them as Pharisees. That all they knew about the law is that they were making sure that everyone abided by the law. And that's why Jesus says, I want you to listen to what they say, and I want you to do what they say, but what? Don't act like them. Because they're far from it. They're not doing anything they prescribed. I mean, they're saying the right things, but don't use them as example. So we can say easily, because just like with the same attitude, that can happen today. So the question by reading this next passage that we're going to do is, when does keepers of the law, and in this case, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, become the law in their own minds? And that's what I want to steer away from us to ever getting to. Never getting to that point. We have not been elected as elected officials to be lawmakers, so we can actually make the laws that go around. We're not in that position. And that can happen, not only to you, but to me as well. And when confronted with the truth, where they're faced with denying and having it stared to them right in the face, we will find out by reading this is what they were not interested in at all. We know that as they followed Jesus, they had no interest in the truth. They weren't looking for the truth, because like for some of them and us today, only two things will happen. Either we come and abide in the truth when we're reading something out of the scriptures and we're finding our face to face in contrast to that. Either we're going to abide with that and follow the words of Jesus, and we accept it as fact, and we accept the fact that he is the Son of God, and since he is, I'm going to listen to him. We mentioned this right after his baptism. It's my beloved Son, hear him. At the Transfiguration, while Peter was so enamored, he said, wow, you're so good to be at this place. Let's set up a tabernacle. Let's set up a museum. Let's set up, wow, I was here when this happened. And then the cloud comes over and it says, this is my Son, listen to him. And then we get to Hebrews 1, basically says in various times, in long times past, it spoke to the fathers and through the prophets and in many different ways, but now speaks through his Son. So when we've accepted the fact that Jesus is the Son of God, and that what he really has to say is relevant for my life, that he is the bread of life, he is the spiritual drink that needs to sustain me in my life, I feel that he's worth listening to, especially when he rose from the grave. If not, let's just pack it up and go find something else to do. I mean, if he did not rise, as what Paul says, then we are to be of the most pitied. If that's all we did is live a life that was a lie, that there was no Jesus Christ raising from the dead. Tells me how I can inherit eternal life. He gives me those words. He tells me how I can go to heaven, how I can live for hope, that I can live my life. I can accept to follow all of his ways or reject it, despise it, flat out oppose it which many in society still do today. So I've been trying to bring out lately more and more of the studies that I come across to helping us all prove who Jesus Christ was then 2,000 years ago as he walked the earth and is now. And is on his throne of glory and is coming back one day to get his people. I mean, that's all that's left. And who is, it says, in fact, it's a queried question by the Lord, is when he returns, will he find anyone faithful? It's very interesting. It's a good question to pose because remember in the days of Noah, only found 8 souls. It got that drastic. We have to find 8 souls to just continue the human race because everything else was going to be extinguished. Truly, the stories we read is Jesus, the Son of God. And that's a big deal because there is no other name under heaven in which we can be saved. Acts 4:12. Because it's one thing just to hear that Jesus is the Son of God. Just hear that as a fact, claim it, and it's another to actually believe it and live it out. See, that's where the problem was. And for the Pharisees and the scribes and those that were around in his days, they wouldn't even get to step 1. They wouldn't even believe it. We have a lot of people that will actually believe it, but then not follow any prescribed notion with it. It just never go any further than that, just accepting the fact. It's what we put our faith in. So it's not just lip service. Where even Jesus stated that in vain do they worship me. How does that happen? I mean, it's just, I hear your lips moving, I hear you say all this stuff, but your hearts are far from me. Not a close second, not you almost got it. It's furthest, it's distance. They honor me with their lips. They say all the right things, but never do anything about it. Now, what else would you call it? In fact, we call it that today. We call it lip service. What do we define as lip service? Someone says, oh, yes, I agree with that. Or I will show up and do that, and then never do it. I'm going to come over there and help you with your house tomorrow. I'm going to be there, and then I don't show up. What was that? I just, you lip service. I heard you say it, but you didn't come through. You didn't follow with what you say. It's why these things were written down in the first place, so that we may believe and not just believe. What are we going to believe? That we believe that out of these stories that we're going to find Jesus truly is the Son of God. That there was a Jesus who walked in this earth and did some mighty, really great things, miraculous things. But let's not just label it as that, as even those who don't even believe says, well, we believe there's a Jesus and he was a great teacher and he did some mighty and really nice things. But we have to go beyond that. That truly is what we set our faith on, that he is the Son of God. So it's a disturbing thing for even us as readers, as spectators in this of the Bible, to see flat out rebellion and to what drastic measures they would take, to what Jesus was trying to get them to see. This account I want us to see is turned over to in Luke chapter 6. So if you have a Bible, you can follow along with us. If not, there's usually one provided in the pew in front of you. Is Luke chapter 6, starting with verse 6. And I told this to the ladies, and I'm going to stop with 6 here because there's an important fact here that Luke's bringing out. Luke's our historian. He's writing down all this stuff. He's interviewing a lot of people. Probably interviewed Mary, and we talked about the birth of Jesus. So we're going along. This is, on another Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and was teaching. Now, when I say, well, what's the significance on another Sabbath? Well, we're going to find in all, Jesus healed 7 individuals on the Sabbath. And as I told the ladies group, it's almost like in today's society, you want to give advice to Jesus to be politically correct in a day in society where we don't want to offend anybody and we certainly don't want to rock the boat. We have these Pharisees, and we're going to see here in a minute that they were there for one reason. They were going to see if this man that was told by them, the keepers of the law, that he could not heal on the Sabbath. For some reason, that was work, and so they were going to make a big deal about it. That's why they were there. So you could have said, well, you know what? I'm going to counsel you a little bit, Jesus. Maybe why don't you heal all the other days of the week? Leave that one alone. Because, you're stirring the pot. You're getting these people really upset, Let's not do that. But there was a purpose, because he knew how hypocritical they were, and we're going to talk about that. But just keep that in the back of your mind when it says on another Sabbath. He went into the synagogue and was teaching. And a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. Now, I want you to put yourself as a bystander, a spectator of seeing this for the first time. If you were to see Jesus and you were just off in the back corner and you saw him teaching and you were just kind of quiet, listening, waiting for something to happen, and then you see that he has attention, that there is this man whose right hand was shriveled. Now, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they were there for a reason. And what was it? So they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up and stand in front of everyone." So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?" He looked around at them all and then said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. Here we have Jesus teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath again, and why this writer, Luke, mentions on another Sabbath. And as we said, that in the fact, the recordings that we have is in the New Testament, and it could have been more, but at least what we have written down in the New Testament, Jesus healed 7 times on the Sabbath. 7 being a perfect number as well, too, if you kind of follow with those and like to gravitate on those. And on this sacred day, Jesus sees a man there with a withered hand. Probably some birth defect or some accident. It's withered. It's drawn back. Very obvious to everyone. We may suggest maybe he was even known by the townspeople. We know that the person that was blind since birth. That can be cataloged by everybody that knew him. It's kind of somewhere in the around town. We have certain people that we know that live on the streets. And if I was to give you a description, you say, "Oh, yeah, I've seen that person." You may not know their name, but you know their story. You may have known that they've been around for a while. It stands out. And Jesus will use this to convince those, once again, and trying to convince those watching, what? That he indeed is the Son of God. And even Nicodemus at another time, who was one of them, who told Jesus straight up as he came to visit him at night, "You can't do what you do unless God is with you." Because no one else is doing this. No one has ever done that, and no one will ever do it again of what you're doing. No one can do that, especially a withered hand. Has it been done since? Have you seen it? Can you come and say, "Oh, yeah, I saw that about 6 months ago. 10 years ago, I witnessed something like this happen"? So what do you do with that knowledge? What is really going on? It's not a magical trick where the guy you see the next day still has the withered hand. A withered hand. That is something. Same for us today. We're either going to believe and follow, or we're going to deny and reject. And the people that already have a hardened, rejected heart, as they say, "Show us a sign," he said, "All the signs you see here is pretty good. No, we want to see fire from heaven." If you were to see fire from heaven, you would explain it away. Just like I can explain some of the illusionists that makes it look like the Statue of Liberty has disappeared. We all know it hasn't, but it's a nice illusion. That's why they're called illusionists, and we go to Vegas and other attractions to see some of these displays of magic. You kind of know that, well, my mind is tricking me. I know that's not reality, but it sure does look good. They would already deny it in their heart. But a withered hand, not a card trick, not some internal cure that no one can see, like maybe migraine headaches. I know you're suffering from migraine headaches and now you're healed. I don't know if they have a migraine headache or not. I can't say that they're telling the truth or lying, but a withered hand, it's pretty obvious. And not only that miracle, but he was also reading everyone's minds. Now tell me, it'd be an awesome and maybe bad at times if someone sitting across from you knew everything that you were thinking, especially if you weren't thinking some good thoughts about that person or something. And they had the ability to be able to do that and bring that to your attention. That would be pretty awe-striking as itself. And then answered what you were thinking when you didn't say a word. And Jesus knew what was in your mind. Nothing would escape him. Nothing will escape him. That's why it says we're naked before him. Nothing is hidden. Oh, I've got something that he's never seen or know about. It's not going to be the case. Notice verse 7 says, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Notice they weren't there to learn. They weren't there to be convinced. They weren't looking for some truth. They were watching him closely by every move, but they had ulterior motives. They had their intentions. They had seen all they needed to. Their minds were already darkened to the possibility that he was not who he said he was and not who he claimed to be even before, even today. In fact, I guess you could say they took all they could stand, and the only thing they wanted to see is if Jesus was going to heal on the Sabbath. That's kind of an embarrassing, as an indictment yourself, to heal. What's the bad thing about that? And that's what Jesus is going to bring out in a minute. What's the bad thing about heal another person? Heal a man with a withered hand who may have suffered from that all of his life. To have compassion on someone's plight or infirmity. Wouldn't we all want to see a miracle just even for that person? To get them out of their misery? Our love for them and their plight? See a miracle even if it's on the Sabbath? But miracles could not be done on the Sabbath according to who? According to them, the now new lawmakers. Because for some reason, this healing is going to define work. I think that I struggle with that on their case. I think I could say it doesn't take much for God to work in this case if all he does is proclaim it. Stretch out your hand. Now, I know talking wasn't forbidden. You could talk on the Sabbath. They didn't consider, even though I can say, well, I could, torque at my jaws a long time and say, well, you're really working that up. You're really working your jaws. They didn't consider that work. And that's all he did. All he had to do is say something, which he does here. He does not get out and do surgery, get out a scalpel and, actually do a surgical procedure, which, okay, then we could say, well, that would kind of constitute in the work category. He commands the man to stretch out his hand is the only thing. And the funny thing that Jesus learned from them as a small boy, as Jesus did, and what he already knew being God, what was the Sabbath for? It's rest for them, as he did as an example. Who gave them the Sabbath? Well, he did. He was the Lord. And he is the Lord of the Sabbath, according to the previous story in verse 5. If you just back up just a little glimpse up there, you'll see that he is saying, the Son of Man gave this to you. He is the one who instructed it. He asked, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath, meaning nothing good can come on that day? And you're telling me that would be against the law? Really? Well, that couldn't be true to when they believed in practice with their own customs. He pointed it out on several occasions to them to show them in these 7 times he was healing on the Sabbath that you could also help an ox get out of a ditch, a sheep out of a pit. But I'll give you one further, and that's what Jesus goes to the extremes. You could help an enemy with an ox or a donkey who had wandered away in Exodus 23, 4, and 5. An enemy. Well, I'm helping my neighbor. No, an enemy. We're going to give you that. Why? Because you're going to show the love of God. And maybe he'll respond to that. It'll be a good thing. And we're okay with that. Even circumcision. Right to the letter. If it landed on the Sabbath, it was okay. They didn't say to the priest, I'm sorry, you're going to have we can't skip a day. This is a mathematical equation. It's an exact. Circumcision is on that day. Circumcised the 8th day, Paul says. And if that 8th day landed on the Sabbath, it was okay for the priest to continue to do that. Well, that's kind of work. It's small, but it's still work. They were okay with that. To show compassion. To show that. And Jesus knew all of that. So why the great heartburn? And yet no exception of grace and love would be given to Jesus in any case. Especially to this one man in his withered hand. Why Jesus asked them straight out in verse 9, I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil? Is it okay for me to do bad on the Sabbath then? Seems that you're okay with that. To save a life or destroy it? And the true keeper of the law should have answered, that is correct. Go and do well. Proceed, Jesus. But see, they didn't want to believe. Their hearts were already darkened. Nor did they turn on that day and say, I am convinced that you are the Son of God. I will follow you anywhere. And I understand pressures around can be mighty. That's why Nicodemus, and we kind of throw him under the bus a little bit because he came at night. How many actually of us in a position as Nicodemus, as one of their leaders who gets it, understands who he is, that there at Jesus' burial, comes around a little bit later on again, that we see him. But he comes at night because he doesn't want to be ridiculed by the rest. And he says, you know what? You've got to be of God if you do these things. No, instead, it was but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious. You may have a different word there. Furious, and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. I think it was pointed out, someone says, you know what, after seeing that, someone actually command a withered hand to be, how do you think that we're going to be able to contain him? If he can do that, he can control the waves to go silent, to have demonic spirits come out. They tried when he went to his hometown, and they didn't like what he heard after he read the prophecy about himself and saying, this day it's fulfilled. They wanted to run him off the cliff. Were they successful? It was a mob mentality. All it says is he slipped through them. Just, you're not going to contain the Lord unless he wants to be contained. You aren't going to arrest Jesus by Judas's kiss unless he allows it. And as he told Pilate, as Pilate says, don't you know who I am? I have the authority to release you. You have no authority unless given to by the Father above. After they didn't even both come up with that and what to do with him, they had already decided that. In fact, the saddening fact as it gets further on in his ministry, John 5:18 says, they sought all the more in ways they would kill him. Right now, this is the early stage. What are we going to do with this man? We're going to plot to find out what do we need to do. How can we silence this person? To forget all that, seeking all the more ways to kill him. I would suggest a lot of them were not law keepers, but instead they were self-law makers in their own realm. They saw themselves as the law. They were keepers of the law, yes, but also delegating what it meant for everyone else. That's why it's interesting when Jesus approached another, it says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And he says, well, keep all the commandments. I've done that. I got it. I've done that since birth. But you've got a lot, tells the rich young ruler. I want you to sell what you have and give to the poor. What happened? Amen. Thank you. Appreciate that. No, he went away sorrowful because he had much. Keeping after what could we do or not do, and above the law and approach even about themselves. There's no wonder Jesus called them what? A brood of vipers. Or malicious. So where does that leave us? What have we become in our life of following Jesus? Maybe we're at the starting point. We want to find out more, and we want to really want him to be the Lord of my life and let him instruct all the ways of walking in the light and the paths of righteousness. Or maybe my mind's made up. I've already achieved that, maybe. Got to the point where I've done that since birth. There's nothing more new that I need to work on in my life. Are you or I above the law, in God's law? And I know we're not saying law of 10 commandments because we've been freed of that. But he does have a law that's written on our hearts, and that's where it's supposed to be. It's his intent. That's why I love Joseph. When he says, how can I do this great evil? When he's talking about Potiphar's wife, there was no 10 commandments to rely on. I can't be an adulterer. That didn't come yet. Why? Because that's God's moral law, and that was passed down to the fathers. That became before Moses. That's remarkable. That's wonderful. And Joseph understood that because it was written on his heart. I can have anything in this house. He and I are equal. I can partake in anything in this house except you being his wife. Can't have that. Where'd he get that? It wasn't the law of Moses. It was written on the moral law, written on our hearts, and it remains the question. Jesus back in 5 reminds them that the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. I made it up. I'm the one that instituted. They saw him come and try to establish and confirm that the Father sent him to do the Father's will and ultimately pay the price for sin. by being that death penalty for us. So we in turn believe that and believe in him and follow him the rest of our lives. Our ultimate question is, are we willing to follow or even keep on following? There are going to be a lot who want to profess that Jesus is the Son of God, and that's it. Look for that Savior one day, and in the end, never have any relationship with him, and that will be stated as well. Someone to be the subject to, because we like to continue to do things our way, but notice that Jesus' own words say, he is the way, he is the truth and life. You want to get to the Father? You have to go through me. The last illustration, one of the strangest illustrations to use as you being something is a door, as a sheep gate. You know, he talks about I'm being the great shepherd. He talks about, shepherding over us and his flock. But he also says, I'm the sheep gate. You have to come in through the sheep gate. And they all knew that. They all know how the livestock stuff works. Only one way in. And he says, I am that gate. And they got the point. I hope we do as well. You must go through him. And I believe that with all of my heart. There is no other name under heaven in which we are to be saved. So who is Jesus to you? He either is the Son of God or he's the greatest liar and charlatan ever. It's either one of the two choices. Either he is who he was and who he said he was and is, or he's not. Pretty simple. We have to decide. The Pharisees got to that point way before. They weren't interested in any. And that's what confuses me so much. All of this prophecy and the temple is gone and destroyed. I know that some people wrestle about whether that comes back. Why do you think that the dome of the rock is right where it's at? And the biggest adversaries of all, since all of the time of old, if they would have just gotten rid of the thorn in the flesh, is there, front and center. Come build your temple now. It's right here. They're in the millions of followers of Islam. You're not getting through that. How do they feel now? Has our Messiah come? And hopefully we can study with people like that to show them that the Messiah has come and we're only waiting for his return. We want everybody else to follow that as well. If we can be of any service to you, we'd offer this as an invitation, and we can pray with you and for you. Maybe you've never obeyed the gospel, and we don't want that as an afforded desire, as an invitation as well. Or just maybe you need something as extra prayer support that lays heavy on your heart. Whatever your need is, if you have one, if you'll come now as we stand and as we sing.